I found out exactly how worthless I was to Adrian Whitmore in front of every powerful person in Atlanta, live, on camera, and impossible to take back. The annual charity gala was supposed to be his night. The room glittered with diamond necklaces and tailored tuxedos, investors sipped expensive whiskey, and news cameras circled the floor to capture the city's most elite power couple. For 7 years, I'd spent every waking minute crafting that power couple image. I'd built his startup from a broke side hustle into a billion-dollar brand. Fixed every one of his career-ruining mistakes. Stayed up for days rewriting his failed pitches. And buried my own thriving consulting dream just to make sure his star burned brighter. I was the silent brain behind his entire empire. And Adrian threw me away like I was disposable trash. The MC handed him the microphone to accept the Entrepreneur of the Year award, the crowd cheering loud enough to rattle the crystal chandeliers overhead. Adrian smiled for the cameras, tall, charming, and impossibly arrogant, and tilted his glass toward the crowd like he'd earned every bit of his success alone. Then he looked straight at me, seated front row in a gown I'd saved months to buy, and destroyed 7 years of my life in one careless, cruel sentence. A lot of people ask me how I built this company from nothing, he drawled, voice booming through every speaker in the ballroom, streaming live to the event's social media feed for thousands to see. The answer is simple. I work hard, I take risks, and I don't rely on anyone else to carry my weight. Unlike some people in my life, who exist only because I provide for them, Claire has no career, no real skills, no independence. She has everything because I let her have it. Without me, she's absolutely nothing. The room went dead silent in an instant. The cheering cut off cold. Cameras zoomed in, catching every flicker of shock on the guests' faces, and every second of my frozen, humiliated reaction. A few people gasped quietly. Others exchanged awkward, pitying glances, already writing me off as the desperate, useless gold digger Adrian had painted me to be. No one knew the truth. No one knew the man standing on that stage accepting praise for his genius was nothing more than a figurehead I'd spent 7 years propping up. I'd written his award-winning business frameworks. I'd negotiated the million-dollar deals he took credit for. I'd pulled him out of public scandal after public scandal when his reckless choices almost tanked the company. I'd turned down 3 six-figure job offers to stay by his side. I'd sacrificed promotions, abandoned my graduate program, and erased my own identity just to keep his perfect billionaire story intact. And in front of the entire Atlanta elite, he'd stripped me of every bit of my dignity for no reason other than his own inflated ego. I sat perfectly still for 10 long seconds. My hands folded in my lap, my heart pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. Tears did not come. Hurt did not surface. Instead, every loyal bone in my body finally snapped. For years, I'd been the quiet, forgiving partner, the one who smoothed his mistakes, who never caused a scene, who let him take all the credit to protect his reputation. But tonight, he'd crossed a line I could never uncross. He didn't just discredit my work, he erased my entire existence. When I stood up, every eye in the room locked on me. Adrian's smile faltered for half a second, like he was vaguely annoyed I was interrupting his moment. He thought I'd stay seated, quiet and obedient, just like I always had. He thought I'd swallow the humiliation, smile for the cameras later, and apologize for ruining his night. I walked slowly up the aisle, the click of my heels echoing through the silent ballroom, and stopped directly in front of him, inches from the stage steps. The microphone still hummed in his hand, live and recording every word. I tilted my chin up and met his arrogant gaze with zero hesitation. "You're right," I said clearly, my voice steady enough for every listener, every camera, every investor watching to hear. "You do all of this. From this second forward, you do every last bit of it alone." Confusion flashed across his face, quickly melting back into condescending amusement. "Baby, don't do this here. You're being dramatic. It's just a joke." "It wasn't a joke to me," I replied flatly. "You just told the entire city I'm worthless. And I'm choosing to believe you, not because it's true, but because I'm done wasting my life building success for a man who's too blind to see who's actually holding him up." Before he could argue, before he could spin some sweet apology for the cameras, I turned and walked away. I did not look back. I did not pause for the whispers or the flashing cameras or the shocked gasps rippling through the crowd. I walked straight through the gilded double doors, out of the suffocating glamour of the gala, and into the dark, open freedom of the Atlanta night. The cool air hit my cheeks the second the doors shut behind me, and I finally breathed properly for the first time in 7 years. For so long, my entire world had revolved around Adrian's schedule, his image, his success, his endless needs. I'd lived in his shadow, tailored my dreams to fit his timeline, and prioritized his peace over my own self-respect. Tonight, I stopped existing for him. I skipped the valet and his fleet of luxury cars, pulled out my phone, and booked a random rideshare to the opposite side of the city. I ignored his first incoming call. Then the second. By the third, I flipped my phone to silent and slipped it into my clutch, letting his frantic messages pile up unread. Ridiculous. Come home now. Don't embarrass us both. I'll apologize later. Later was no longer good enough. I'd waited 7 years for a later that never came. An hour later, I stepped back into the massive, modern mansion Adrian owned, the house I'd designed, decorated, and maintained single-handedly for years. It was cold, empty, and sterile, a perfect showcase of wealth with no trace of my hard work ever existing. I grabbed one small rolling suitcase and packed only my personal, unconnected belongings, old clothes, my childhood jewelry, my abandoned career portfolio, the things that belonged solely to me. I left every designer gift, every luxury watch, every expensive piece of jewelry he'd ever given me untouched in my closet. I didn't want a single thing he'd ever thrown at me to quiet my sacrifices. I systematically erased every tie between us. I unlinked our shared bank accounts, deleted shared cloud drives that held years of my uncredited business work, removed my access to his company databases, and canceled all scheduled personal and professional support tasks I'd been handling for him. I stripped away every invisible layer of labor that had kept his perfect life running smoothly. I was halfway done when Adrian burst through the front door, slamming it hard enough to rattle the walls. His face was flushed with rage and wounded ego, his suit jacket discarded, his hair messy from rushing home. He stared at my packed suitcase like I'd committed an unforgivable crime against him. "You're leaving me over a little stage comment?" he snapped, storming across the living room to tower over me. "This is insane. I give you a penthouse, luxury cars, unlimited spending, and you walk out because I teased you in front of a crowd? You're spoiled, Claire. This is why no one takes you seriously." I zipped my suitcase shut, the sound final and unyielding in the quiet room, and lifted my eyes to meet his furious gaze. There was no anger in me, no tears, no bitterness, only exhausted, unshakable truth. "You didn't tease me," I said calmly. "You publicly erased 7 years of my life. You told everyone I'm useless while you sit on a throne I built for you. I'm not leaving because I'm spoiled. I'm leaving because I'm finally worth more than being your invisible crutch." He blinked, stunned for a split second, before his arrogant smirk returned. He crossed his arms, utterly confident in his victory, completely blind to the reality unfolding in front of him. "Fine. Run. But you'll be back before sunrise," he scoffed. "You have nothing without me. No job, no connections, no money. You've lived in my world too long to survive on your own. You'll regret this the second you're alone." I slung my suitcase forward, stepping past him without a single glance backward. "I've survived for 7 years carrying you. I think I'll manage just fine on my own." I opened the front door and stepped out into the dark suburban night, the cool wind brushing my face as I pulled the door closed behind me with a sharp, definitive click. In that moment, my old life died. Behind me, Adrian stood in his perfect, empty mansion, fully convinced I was a lost, desperate woman who would crawl back to his feet by morning. But I knew the truth. He wasn't losing a dependent. He was losing the only person who ever made his entire perfect world possible. And by the time the sun rose, he would start to realize exactly how broken he was without me. Adrian Whitmore slept soundly that night, blind and arrogant as ever. Convinced my quiet exit was nothing more than a fleeting temper tantrum. He'd spent 7 years growing addicted to my endless compromise, my silent fixes, my unwavering loyalty. To him, I was a fixture, steady, reliable, and permanently within reach. He assumed I'd spend the night crying in some hotel room, humbled and lonely, and crawl back to his mansion at sunrise, begging for his forgiveness and his luxury life. He couldn't have been more wrong, while he tossed comfortably in his custom king bed, surrounded by the wealth I'd built for him. I slept peacefully in a sparse, unadorned downtown apartment. No marble floors, no private staff, no designer everything, just clean air, quiet peace, and the freedom of no longer existing for someone else's ego. For the first time in my 20s, I didn't wake up in the middle of the night triple-checking his schedule, editing his pending emails, or stressing over his next corporate crisis. I slept for me, and it was revolutionary. Meanwhile, Adrian's flawless billion-dollar empire began collapsing before he even opened his eyes. For 7 years, I'd been his invisible backbone. I curated every meal to fit his busy schedule, prepped every investor briefing down to the smallest data detail, filtered every toxic client email, mediated every internal company conflict, and adjusted every tiny routine that kept his public image polished and his business running flawlessly. I handled all the messy, tedious, critical work he never knew existed. Overnight, I erased every single piece of my labor. He woke up to chaos he had zero clue how to fix. His daily schedule tablet was blank. No meetings, no reminders, no pre-planned investor calls. His private chef stood idle in a lavish empty kitchen, waiting for my personalized meal instructions that never arrived. His work inbox was flooded with hundreds of unfiltered, urgent client complaints and partnership queries I'd always screened and sorted for him. Every safety net I'd woven around his life was gone. His first morning investor check-in was a public disaster, without my pre-call talking points, risk assessments, and negotiation buffers. Adrian stumbled through every answer. He misquoted quarterly data, missed critical partnership deadlines, and came off unorganized, unpolished, and unprepared in front of top-tier investors who'd once praised him as a business genius. The room left the call cold and skeptical, their faith in his brand shaken for the first time in years. His COO Eli Torres, the only insider who knew the full truth of my contributions, pulled him aside with unmissable gravity. "This never happens when Claire's handling your prep," Eli said bluntly, no longer sugarcoating reality to spare his ego. "Your entire operational smoothness relies on her. You've just never admitted it." Adrian's pride flared hot and defensive. He scowled, dismissing the obvious truth as bad luck, refusing to confront how dependent he'd always been on the woman he'd publicly called worthless. "It's a one-time oversight. I don't need her to run my company." But denial couldn't stop the chaos from snowballing. While Adrian drowned in workplace messes, I spent my day rebuilding the life I'd sacrificed for him. I dug out my long-forgotten consulting portfolio, filled with award-winning strategies and client success stories I'd never been allowed to claim credit for. I reconnected with old industry leads I'd abandoned to prioritize Adrian's career. And for the first time in 7 years, I pitched my services under my own name, Claire Bennett. Independent strategist. My best friend Mia kept me updated on Atlanta's elite gossip circles. The gala humiliation was viral in high society spaces. And everyone was quietly saying the same thing: Adrian had thrown away the only person who made his empire untouchable. By evening, Adrian's minor morning mess exploded into a costly corporate crisis. Normally, I edited every single one of his outgoing client emails, softening his brutal arrogance, refining his tone, and preventing unnecessary conflict. Left unfiltered, his blunt, entitled reply to a long-term multi-million-dollar partner sparked outrage. The client formally threatened to terminate their year-long contract, pulling massive revenue from Whitmore Enterprises overnight. For the first time in his career, Adrian had no one to bail him out. No one to smooth his mistakes, mend broken business relationships, or clean up his self-inflicted messes. He was forced to sit alone in his empty office and stare at the destruction of his own ego. Panic finally cracked his cocky facade. Late that night, after hours of scrambling and failing to fix what I'd always handled effortlessly, he texted me for the first time since I left. No arrogance, no taunts, no childish accusations, just raw, desperate uncertainty. "The house and the company don't work without you. Come back." I stared at the message for 10 seconds, then locked my phone and set it aside. He didn't miss me. He missed my labor, my convenience, my ability to make his life perfect. And I was never again going to be the invisible fixer for a man who refused to see my worth. As I fell asleep in my quiet, ordinary apartment, I knew the real downfall of Adrian Whitmore had only just begun. Adrian woke up confident I would beg for forgiveness before sunrise. He was wrong. While I slept soundly in my small downtown apartment, no schedule to manage, no emails to answer, no ego to soothe, his flawless billionaire life began unraveling at the seams. For 7 years, I'd manually curated every inch of his routine, tailored meal plans, prepped investor briefings, filtered emails, conflict mediation, even temperature adjustments for his office. I was his invisible operating system. Overnight, I deleted every thread of my labor. He woke to a blank schedule, no breakfast prepared, and a flooded, unfiltered inbox full of urgent client requests he never knew how to navigate. His chef stood idle, waiting for my daily meal instructions that never came. His morning investor check-in arrived with 0 pre-notes, 0 risk analyses, 0 talking points. Adrian stumbled through the call, fumbling data points and missing key negotiation opportunities. His investors left cautious and unimpressed. His COO, Eli Torres, who'd watched me prop up Adrian's career for years, pulled him aside with quiet concern. "We never have messy calls when Claire handles prep," Eli said plainly. Adrian's pride flared. He brushed it off as a minor glitch, refusing to admit how dependent he'd always been on me. Meanwhile, I spent my day rebuilding my life. I dug up my old consulting portfolio, reconnected with abandoned client leads, and breathed in the freedom of prioritizing myself for once. Mia, my best friend, updated me on the elite gossip circuit. Everyone was stunned I'd walked away. And half the room already knew Adrian had thrown away his most valuable asset. By evening, Adrian's small daily chaos exploded into a corporate crisis. Left unedited by my usual buffer, his blunt, arrogant email offended a long-term multi-million-dollar client, who threatened to terminate their contract immediately. For the first time, Adrian had no one to fix his mess. No one to smooth his tone, mend his relationships, or cover his flaws. That midnight, his first arrogant texts melted into shaky uncertainty. He texted me one simple, desperate line: "The house and the company don't work without you." I left it on read. I was no longer his convenience. Adrian Whitmore had spent his entire adult life untouchable. Wealth, fame, and unearned success had molded him into a man who believed every problem could be solved with a swipe of a card, every person could be bought with luxury, and every conflict would bend to his ego. The first 2 days without me chipped away at his perfect routine. But it was the third day that finally cracked his unshakable pride, and turned his casual arrogance into desperate, frantic panic still. He could not understand the real reason I'd left. In his distorted worldview, I had zero leverage. I'd spent 7 years in his shadow, living in his mansion, surrounded by his wealth, benefiting from his status. He was convinced my sudden exit was nothing more than a calculated stunt, a dramatic bid for more attention, more public credit, more expensive gifts, more power in our relationship. The concept that I'd walked away purely for self-respect, for dignity, for the career and identity he'd crushed beneath his ego, was entirely foreign to him. So he resorted to the only playbook he'd ever known, bribery. My phone blew up nonstop from sunrise to midnight. Long paragraphs, rushed voice notes, sporadic calls, all of them dripping with the same condescending generosity he'd always hidden his insecurity behind. He promised to upgrade my tiny, humble downtown apartment to a skyline penthouse with private elevators and exclusive amenities. He swore he'd deposit 5-figure sums into my account without a single string attached. He offered me unlimited shopping budgets, a brand new luxury car, and any material possession I could possibly name. Every message carried the same toxic subtext he'd always believed deep down: everyone has a price. You're just waiting to name yours. Stop punishing yourself to prove a pointless point. He texted me mid-morning, his tone equal parts annoyed and patronizing. This little independent struggle is unnecessary. Come home right now, and I'll give you everything you could ever want. You're just wasting your time trying to make it on your own. I stared at his words and felt nothing but cold, unwavering clarity. He had no memory of the countless 6-figure job offers I'd turned down for him. He had no recollection of the prestigious industry promotions I'd rejected, the graduate program I'd put on permanent hold, the personal brand I'd buried entirely to keep his reputation spotless. I'd never loved his money. I'd never craved his luxury. I'd spent 7 years craving partnership, gratitude, acknowledgement, and respect, the intangible, priceless things his billions could never purchase. I typed back one short, unbreakable reply to shatter every last one of his delusions: I'm not struggling. I'm free. Your money fixed my lifestyle problems for 7 years, but it never fixed your ego or your blindness. I'm not coming back. That single reply shook Adrian to his core. No one had ever refused him. No one had ever turned down his generosity, walked away from his status, or chosen independence over the comfort he provided. His entire worldview relied on the belief that he was the prize in our relationship, that I was lucky to cling to his orbit. My choice to leave voluntarily, to thrive without him, to reject everything he thought made him superior, terrified him more than any corporate loss ever could. While he spiraled behind closed doors, growing more frustrated and desperate by the hour, I continued building my new life with calm, steady purpose. I officially launched my independent consulting profile, carefully curating every detail of my portfolio to showcase the years of uncredited, high-level strategy work I'd done for his company. I leaned into the quiet industry buzz circulating after the gala incident. Professionals and insiders who'd long known I was the true brains behind Whitmore Enterprises were eager to work with me directly, no longer filtered through Adrian's ego or overshadowed by his name. By midday, I signed my first official solo client, a fast-growing mid-sized startup in desperate need of brand restructuring and operational overhauls. The project was smaller than the billion-dollar deals I'd orchestrated for Adrian, but it was mine, fully, completely, unapologetically mine. There would be no one to steal credit for my strategies, no one to edit my work to feed their own image, no one to erase my efforts to make themselves look better. Back at Whitmore Enterprises, the chaos snowballed into full-scale disarray. Without my structured workflows, detailed organizational systems, and hands-on oversight, the entire company machinery began to jam. Staff members were confused, overworked, and overwhelmed by sudden unfiltered workloads. Client complaints piled up unanswered. Long-term partnership disputes sat unresolved. Projects that once ran like clockwork stalled for days on end. The flawless, polished empire Adrian had bragged about to investors for years was finally exposed for what it truly was: a fragile house of cards, held upright solely by my invisible, uncelebrated labor. Adrian's demeanor shifted drastically. The effortless, charismatic billionaire charm he was famous for vanished entirely. He grew irritable, restless, and visibly unsure of himself, flustered in meetings, second-guessing every decision, snapping at his employees over trivial mistakes. Yet even as his world crumbled around him, he still refused to apologize. He did not miss me. He missed the ease, the perfection, and the zero-stress lifestyle my hard work had gifted him. By the end of the third day, the power dynamic between us had irreversibly shifted. I was steadily rising, building a legacy rooted in my own talent and merit. He was sinking fast, drowning in the empty, hollow ruins of the fake success he'd always claimed credit for. For an entire week, Adrian clung fiercely to his denial. He blamed bad timing, employee error, client fickleness, anything and everything except the one true reason his company was falling apart, me leaving him. But by the seventh day, denial was no longer an option. Mounting client losses, stalled quarterly growth, and growing investor skepticism pushed his company to the brink of a public crisis. Desperate to salvage his failing quarterly report and stabilize his plummeting brand reputation, Adrian was forced to dig deep into the company's encrypted, archived project files he'd never once bothered to open or review during his entire reign as CEO. He'd always skimmed the surface of his own success, content to stand on stage and take public praise for results he'd never actively worked to achieve. He'd never understood the late nights, the meticulous revisions, the calculated risk assessments, and the relentless crisis management that kept his empire afloat. But when he finally uncovered the full scope of my hidden work, every last illusion about his self-made legacy shattered completely. Folder after folder revealed the unvarnished truth. Every core business model that scaled his startup to a billion-dollar enterprise was drafted by me. Every high-revenue negotiation script that secured his biggest partnerships was written by me. Every crisis PR plan that saved his brand from public ruin was engineered by me. Every award-winning brand strategy that elevated his company above competitors was designed, revised, and perfected entirely by my hands. Buried metadata and timestamp records proved I'd spent countless sleepless nights refining his messy, incomplete, reckless ideas into polished, profitable, scalable business plans. He found old draft documents marked only with my initials, unused presentation slides I'd crafted to cover his presentation weaknesses, detailed risk analyses he'd never read, and lengthy email threads where I'd single-handedly de-escalated catastrophic client conflicts he'd never even known existed. For 7 long years, he'd stood in the spotlight, accepting awards, praise, and media adoration for work I'd done entirely alone. Eli Torres, his longtime COO and the only insider who'd watched every late-night sacrifice, every uncredited effort, and every silent compromise I'd made, finally ended his years of cautious silence. He delivered the blunt, unvarnished truth no one else dared to speak to Adrian's face. You're only the face of this company, Adrian. Claire was the brain, the backbone, and the safety net. You never built this empire, you only fronted it. She fixed every terrible, impulsive decision you ever made. She softened your toxic communication style to save client relationships. She turned every one of your reckless gambles into guaranteed profit. The entire team watched her carry you for years. You were the only one too arrogant to see it. The words landed like a wrecking ball against his ego. In that moment, Adrian was forced to confront the brutal reality he'd spent 7 years avoiding. His success was never self-made. It was a gift. A gift from the woman he'd publicly humiliated, belittled, and written off as worthless and dependent. He'd always believed he'd done me a massive favor by letting me stand beside him, by gifting me luxury and status. Now he finally understood the truth. I'd been the one carrying his entire career, his reputation, and his billion-dollar empire on my shoulders all along. That night, fleeting frustration and petty anger faded into heavy, bone-deep regret. It was no longer the pain of losing a convenient lifestyle or a polished public image. It was the genuine, crushing sorrow of realizing he'd thrown away the most brilliant, loyal, selfless person he'd ever known, all for a fleeting moment of ego and stage pride. For the first time since our breakup, he texted me without bribes, without demands, without arrogance. His message was raw, humble, and unguarded, stripped of every pretense. I was wrong about everything. I don't deserve you, but I finally see every single thing you did for me. I'm so sorry. I read his apology, locked my phone, and felt absolutely nothing. His truth had arrived far too late to fix the 7 years of invisibility, neglect, and humiliation he'd inflicted on me. Regret does not erase damage, and I was already long past needing his recognition to know my worth. 1 month after I walked away from the gala and from Adrian's gilded world, our lives existed in stark, irreversible contrast. The scales had tipped completely, and there was no going back. My independent consulting business exploded with unprecedented growth. Word spread like wildfire throughout Atlanta's tight-knit business industry. The anonymous genius strategist behind Whitmore Enterprises' decade of success had finally stepped out of the shadows and launched her own firm. Industry professionals, startup founders, and corporate leaders flocked to work with me, choosing my proven expertise and reliable results over Adrian's now tarnished, unstable brand. I took on high-profile, Transformative projects that challenged me, fueled my passion, and let me showcase my full range of talent. For the first time in my adult life, every win was mine to claim, every success was mine to celebrate, every achievement was attached solely to my name, Claire Bennett. No longer a side character, no longer a background support system, no longer Adrian's invisible girlfriend. I was a self-made, respected, sought-after business consultant. And I thrived in every moment of it, while I climbed higher and higher, solidifying my independent legacy. Adrian's world continued to unravel without my stabilizing influence. His company lost 3 major long-term clients worth millions in annual revenue. Investor confidence plummeted. Industry whispers turned into public scrutiny, as professionals began to openly discuss how much of Adrian's success was built on my uncredited labor. Without my meticulous damage control, my strategic brand refinement, and my ability to soften his sharp, arrogant personality, his true flaws were on full display for the entire business world to witness. The untouchable billionaire facade crumbled completely. He grew quiet, exhausted, and uncharacteristically humble. The effortless confidence that had once made him the star of every gala and industry event was gone, replaced by stress, uncertainty, and the heavy weight of his own wasted luck. His attempts to reach me shifted dramatically. He abandoned all bribes, all offers of money and luxury, all condescending attempts to buy me back. He grew softer, more sincere, and painfully accountable in every message and call. He no longer tried to manipulate me with status or wealth. He only tried to atone for his years of blindness and cruelty. During one late-night call, his voice was unsteady, stripped of every ounce of his former pride. I thought money, power, and status made me successful, he confessed quietly. But none of it meant anything without you holding it all together. I wasted your youth, your talent, your dreams, your entire career, all for my stupid ego. I'll never forgive myself for that. I listened calmly, my heart fully healed and completely untouched by his remorse. I spoke gently but firmly, laying out the uncrossable line between us once and for all. You're sorry you lost the perfect, easy life I built for you, I told him plainly. You're not sorry for making me invisible for 7 years. You're not sorry for erasing my achievements, for taking credit for my work, for humiliating me publicly. There's a huge difference, Adrian. And that difference is why we will never go back. He had no rebuttal, no defense, no arrogant retort left. He knew I was right. His regret was genuine, but it was rooted in loss, not in true redemption. The power dynamic was no longer even remotely competitive. I was thriving in freedom, success, and self-fulfillment. He was trapped in the lonely, crumbling ruins of the perfect empire I'd gifted him, and he knew it. Adrian begged relentlessly for weeks for a single in-person conversation. He swore he only wanted closure, only wanted to apologize properly, only wanted a chance to explain how deeply he'd changed. I finally agreed, not because I harbored any hope of reconciliation, not because I missed him, not because I needed his apology. I agreed purely for myself. I needed one final, face-to-face closing to fully seal this chapter of my life. To walk away with no lingering what-ifs. No unresolved emotion, no loose ends. We met at a small, quiet downtown cafe tucked in my new neighborhood, neutral ground, my terms, my space. No lavish mansions, no crowded elite galas, no cameras, no audience for his ego. It was just 2 people, sitting across from each other, forced to face the broken truth of our 7 years together. Adrian looked unrecognizable from the polished, arrogant billionaire I'd known. His usual sharp suit was rumpled, his hair unkempt, his eyes tired and sunken from weeks of stress and regret. His signature effortless charm was completely gone. He looked worn down, humbled, and genuinely broken. For the first time ever, he did not look like a powerful, untouchable tycoon. He looked like a man who'd lost the best thing he'd ever had, and knew he deserved every bit of his suffering. He came prepared with endless promises and desperate bargains. Clinging to the last shred of hope that he could fix the unfixable. I'll publicly credit every single one of your achievements in front of the entire industry, he said urgently. I'll release a formal public apology for the gala, for every year I erased your work. I'll fully fund your consulting firm, back every project you take on. I'll step down from the company if you want, let you take your rightful place as the face and strategist of Whitmore. Just please, don't cut me out forever. Don't leave me with nothing but regret. I looked at him steadily, my eyes clear and unclouded by anger, sadness, or longing. I spoke with quiet, unshakable certainty, every word final. It's too late for fixes, apologies, or second chances. For 7 years, I shrank myself small to fit your world. I put your dreams above mine, your success above my career, your ego above my dignity. I sacrificed everything I was and everything I wanted to make you unstoppable, and you called me worthless for every single bit of it. I don't need your money, your credibility, your company, or your validation anymore. I built my own success from nothing, just like I built yours. The only difference now is that I value my work enough to claim it openly. I can never go back to being the invisible woman behind your glory. I've outgrown that life. I've outgrown you. Adrian's eyes glistened with raw, vulnerable regret he'd never allowed anyone to witness. In that moment, he finally understood the full, irreversible weight of his mistake. He hadn't just lost a partner, a supporter, or an employee. He'd lost the only person who'd ever loved him selflessly. The only person who'd ever believed in him enough to build an empire for him. The only person who'd ever made his entire world possible. His voice cracked. Soft and broken, I was always the lucky one. I just never had the wisdom to see it until you were completely gone. I nodded slowly, pushing my chair back to stand. My tone was calm, definitive, and final. Luck that's wasted doesn't get a second chance. This is goodbye, Adrian. I turned and walked out of the cafe without a single glance back, leaving him sitting alone with his guilt, his mistakes, and his permanent regret. 6 months carved an uncrossable chasm between Adrian Whitmore and me. No lingering texts, accidental run-ins, or old ties bound us. We shared the same city yet lived in entirely separate worlds. I'd moved fully forward, while Adrian remained trapped in the mistakes of our past, freed from 7 years of fixing his errors, polishing his image, and burying my ambition to fuel his glory. I finally blossomed into the confident, unapologetic woman I was always meant to be. The invisible strategist who'd spent years hidden behind his billionaire shadow was gone. In her place stood Claire Bennett, thriving entirely on her own merit. My independent consulting firm quickly rose to prominence among Georgia's business elite. Word of my transformative brand strategies and turnaround work spread fast, turning my solo startup into a high-demand, prestigious agency. I opened a modern downtown office, built a talented young team, and mentored overlooked industry talents to step into well-deserved spotlight roles. I took on high-stakes, fulfilling projects credited solely to my name and vision. I spoke at national conferences and joined elite professional panels, no longer sidelined while others claimed my hard-earned success. Every milestone, every victory, belonged entirely to me, earned through my own dedication and expertise. Most importantly, I found unshakable inner peace. Fully healed from years of invisibility, neglect, and public humiliation, I no longer craved external validation. I knew my talent and worth intrinsically, whole and self-sufficient, no longer dependent on wealth or status to define my value. While I stepped into a boundless future, Adrian settled into permanent mediocrity. He stabilized his company's profits but never reclaimed its revolutionary industry greatness, an edge that had always come from my work. Not his self-proclaimed grit or charisma, stripped of my innovative frameworks, crisis control, and client diplomacy, his brand lost its leading edge. It remained stable and profitable enough to keep him wealthy, yet every decision felt clunky, every deal required twice the effort for half the reward. For the first time, he endured the grueling, thankless labor I'd poured into his empire for 7 years. Finally tasting the mediocre results his ego had long ignored, his personal life dissolved into empty loneliness. He never pursued another relationship to fill the void I'd left. Former staff and industry contacts shared he obsessively archived all my old drafts and strategy documents, studying my meticulous work late into quiet nights. Finally grasping the irreplaceable talent he discarded. He turned his loss into a humbling mantra for every new team member: never take the quiet, brilliant, loyal people behind your success for granted. Those who work in the dark to make others shine build true greatness, a lesson he learned far too late. Regret became his constant companion. A soft, heavy, lingering ache haunting his lonely nights and tedious workdays. He retained his wealth and status, but he lived each day knowing he'd traded his greatest luck for a fleeting moment of hollow ego. Our final encounter unfolded at a prestigious downtown industry gala, 6 months after our breakup. The same elite crowd that once watched him humiliate me witnessed a complete reversal of our dynamic. This time, the spotlight belonged solely to me. Surrounded by colleagues and collaborators, I radiated quiet confidence. Peers flocked to celebrate my firm's explosive growth and industry breakthroughs, eager for my partnership and guidance. I networked and spoke with effortless poise. No longer an accessory or shadow, only the star of my own story. Across the crowd, Adrian spotted me instantly. He stood alone at the bar. No entourage, no arrogant smirk, his shoulders slouched with unspoken remorse. He watched me thrive in the free, celebrated life he'd always denied me. Overwhelmed by the full weight of his mistakes, his gaze lingered long and yearning, filled with endless unspoken what-ifs. I saw regret for the gala humiliation, for years of taking my labor for granted, and for losing the only person who'd ever loved and built him up selflessly. I met his gaze briefly, calm and unhurt, and offered a gentle, neutral smile. Pure closure. No bitterness, no affection, no sorrow. A silent final acknowledgement of our fractured past. I turned back to my conversation without a second glance. In that moment, our stories were sealed forever. I walked forward into a bright, limitless future. Unshackled and fully alive, Adrian remained trapped in the past. Anchored to that cruel gala night, condemned to quiet, lifelong regret. Stuck with wealth and the mediocre success he could finally achieve on his own. He never saved me. He never elevated me. He was only ever the lucky man who had me, and in his blind, foolish arrogance, he lost me forever, freed from 7 years of fixing his errors, polishing his image, and burying my ambition to fuel his glory. I finally bloomed into the woman I was always meant to be. The invisible strategist hidden behind a billionaire's shadow was gone. In her place stood Claire Bennett, confident, unapologetic, and wildly successful in my own right. My independent consulting firm surged in popularity across Georgia's business elite. Word of my transformative work, reviving failing brands and building game-changing strategies, spread fast. What began as a solo venture quickly grew into a prestigious, high-demand agency. I opened a modern downtown office with skyline views, built a team of young, talented strategists, and mentored overlooked industry talents to step into the spotlight. I took on high-stakes, fulfilling projects credited solely to my name and vision. I spoke at national conferences and joined elite professional panels, no longer sidelined while others claimed my hard-earned spotlight. Every milestone and victory belonged entirely to me, earned by my own merit and dedication. Most importantly, I found unshakable inner peace. Fully healed from years of invisibility, neglect, and public humiliation, I no longer craved external validation. I knew my talent and worth intrinsically, whole and self-sufficient without wealth or status to define me. While I stepped into a boundless future, Adrian settled into permanent mediocrity. He stabilized his company's profits but never reclaimed the revolutionary greatness that defined his brand, greatness that had always stemmed from me. Not his self-proclaimed grit or charisma, stripped of my innovative frameworks, crisis control, and client diplomacy, his brand lost its industry-leading edge. It remained stable and profitable enough to keep him wealthy, but every decision felt clunky, every deal required twice the effort for half the reward. For the first time, he endured the grueling, thankless labor I'd poured into his empire for 7 years. Tasting the mediocre results his ego had long ignored, his personal life dissolved into empty loneliness. He never pursued another relationship to fill the void I'd left. Former staff and industry contacts shared he obsessively archived all my old drafts and strategy documents, studying my meticulous work late into quiet nights. Finally grasping the irreplaceable talent he discarded. He turned his loss into a humbling mantra for every new team member: never take the quiet, brilliant, loyal people behind your success for granted. Those who work in the dark to make others shine build true greatness, a lesson he learned far too late. Regret became his constant companion. A soft, heavy, lingering ache that haunted his lonely nights and tedious workdays. He had wealth and status, but he lived knowing he'd traded his greatest luck for a fleeting moment of hollow ego. Our final encounter unfolded at a prestigious downtown industry gala. 6 months after our breakup. The same elite crowd that witnessed his public humiliation of me watched our dynamic shift completely. This time, the spotlight belonged solely to me. Surrounded by colleagues and collaborators, I radiated quiet confidence. Peers flocked to celebrate my firm's explosive growth and industry breakthroughs, eager for my partnership and guidance. I networked and spoke with effortless poise. No longer an accessory or shadow, only the star of my own story. Across the crowd, Adrian spotted me instantly. He stood alone at the bar. No entourage, no arrogant smirk, his shoulders slouched with unspoken remorse. He watched me thrive in the free, celebrated life he'd always denied me. Overwhelmed by the full weight of his mistakes, his gaze lingered long in yearning, filled with endless unspoken what-ifs. I saw regret for the gala humiliation, for years of taking my labor for granted, and for losing the only person who'd ever loved and built him up selflessly. I met his gaze briefly, calm and unhurt, and offered a gentle, neutral smile, pure closure. No bitterness, no affection, no sorrow. A silent final acknowledgement of our fractured past. I turned back to my conversation without a second glance. In that moment, our stories were sealed forever. I walked forward into a bright, limitless future. Unshackled and fully alive, Adrian remained trapped in the past. Anchored to that cruel gala night, condemned to quiet, lifelong regret. Stuck with wealth and the mediocre success he could finally achieve on his own. He never saved me. He never elevated me. He was only ever the lucky man who had me, and in his blind, foolish arrogance, he lost me forever.